Hey guys, welcome back to another art doll video. So this one is going to be how I made my new doll, the Jaguar. So this is all handmade. It's made from polymer clay head and feet, ball and socket armature, faux fur that has been airbrushed, and lots of little detailing. So it is available in my shop at creaturesofnat.com. Payment plans are also welcome. So just shoot me a message and I can let you know how they work. I'm pretty flexible with all that stuff. But if you want to know how I made him, then keep watching. Okay, so I'm going to start off by creating a little ball with aluminium foil, and that basically creates a skull-like shape. And then I'm going to cover it in Sculpey Original. So that's the softer Sculpey. You can use Sculpey Firm, which is a really hard one, or Super Sculpey, which is like a beige coloured one, medium strength. I usually use that one for like noses or inside mouths. What else? So I'm going to cover that initial layer in just a really rough layer of a polymer clay, and then I can start working on blocking out all of the detail work, and then once I've blocked out the way I want it to look, I can start adding a bit more refining pieces. When it's refined to a point that I'm happy with, I can then start adding the final detailing piece. I'm not going to go too overboard with this one just because I'm going to be covering it with faux fur anyway, so I'm not going to smooth out the clay too much or add too many details. Now I can start working on the muzzle area. So Jaguars have quite a big muzzle, so I've got a couple of reference images up on my computer next to me at all different angles, and I can sort of start mapping out how I want the muzzle to look. This version is going to have a closed mouth version, so I didn't have to do any of the sculpting that I needed to do for the black Jaguar with the mouth open, so like the teeth and the tongue and everything like that. So this is a little bit more of a simpler sculpt. And then I can start adding the little lip lines that they see. So this little lip line is going to be painted black, and then the faux fur is going to be buttered up against that. Now I can start working on the nose area. So the nose, I'm going to be sculpting it out of Super Sculpey. That's just basically the little tiny nose piece that you can see, because I wanted that beige colour, but the rest of the head I'm going to sculpt in Sculpey Original. So basically I just condition a tiny bit of the Super Sculpey and then cut out a shape, a really rough shape of the nose, and then I can start refining it a little bit once it's been put on the head. And I don't want it too thick, and I basically push the corners in a little bit so it sort of wraps around the head. So that's a good little handy tip if you're sculpting a nose, not to lay it flat and to just push the edges in so it wraps around the face a little bit. Okay, so I can start basically bulking out the side of the head and refining where I want the eyes to go. So basically I'm just mapping out a really rough shape of where I want the eyes to go. Then I can add basically an eye socket and add the eyes to that socket. So for the eye socket, I basically roll out 2 bits of clay, roughly the same size, and place it where I want the eyes to sit. And then I flatten out the front area of it and so I could place the cabochons, which I'm using for the eyes. So sometimes I make eyes, sometimes I paint them. For these ones, they are already bought eyes. They're just glass cabochons with eye backing on them. I've chosen like a greeny yellow eye for this one. For the Black Panther, I did like a yellowy light amber eye. So I thought the green would look really nice with the orange coat. So I basically plop it on there and make sure it's all symmetrical, it's sitting the right way, it's not any cockeyed or anything like that. And then I can start refining the eye. So for the eyelids, I basically roll out a thin worm shape and place it over the top of the eye. And you can really create a lot of different looks by doing it this way. I firstly do the lower eye and then I do the top eyelid, and the direction that you put the eye, you can either make it angry, you can make it sad, you can make it just look so many different ways. So it's always good to have a little play around to find the look that you want on your doll. I can definitely do a video on this in the future. I've been meaning to do it for so long, so many years, I've never gotten around to doing it. So let me know if you want a video on how to do different looks in your animal's eyes. So once I'm happy with the way the eyes are looking, I can start building up the brow line. So Jaguars don't really have a really solid brow like a snow leopard does, so I don't need to go too harsh on the brow line. So I've just got a larger snake of clay and then just sort of placing it over the top, and I'll blend it into the rest of the head as well, and just create some more just a little bit more refining once everything's been put together. So it's just basically blocking out the way I want things to look. And then I can start building up the top of the head and like the middle of the brow line, because it always ends up looking a little bit weird. So I just end up building that once the eyes and the brows are done. And I just went in with my silicone tool just to create like a little divot on the top of the head. Not that it translates much when you put faux fur over it, but it just sort of helps refine it a little bit more. So it's just details like this that you don't really need to do, but sometimes it helps do it. And you can sort of recreate it once the faux fur is on as well, by trimming some areas. So I just think it's a necessary step when sculpting, just to sort of make the piece look a bit more finished. Then I can start creating the ears, so I roll out equal bits of clay again, just so they're the same size, and basically shape an ear out of my fingers by using my thumb to push the tip of it out. You want it to be a rounded ear as well, so Jaguars don't really have a pointed ear, so the thumb's really great for getting that rounded edge on it. Then I'm going to go and use my reference images to see exactly where the ears sit. So I'm just marking out where I want the ears to sit, and then I can start placing it and blending it into the rest of the head. And you can achieve different looks by doing it this way as well, and shaping the ear a certain way. So you can shape it so it's facing backwards, so it looks a little bit more angry. You can shape it facing forward, it looks a bit more alert. And I just added a little bit more detailing to the other side of the ear as well, just to get that fur to stick up, and just sort of blending the ear to make sure it is properly adhered to the rest of the head. Okay, so I'm just getting a little look at the entire head, make sure I'm happy with the way everything's looking, and then I can start adding just a little bit of fur detailing. I'm not going to go overboard, like I said, I'm covering with faux fur anyway. So I'm just going to use a little needle tool just to create some fur texture, basically around the eyes and the muzzle area, just the areas that I think is going to be a little bit thin. You don't necessarily have to do this, but I find when I'm using faux fur, it helps blend it into the thinner parts. Now for the paws, I'm going to have to sculpt 4 different paws for this one, so I'm pretty good at sculpting the paws quickly these days. A really good way is to roll out equal parts for each single paw, so 4 times, to make sure you're using the same volume of clay, so they turn out roughly the same size and shape. And basically just putting the toes on individually. I find that is the quickest way of doing it, rather than trying to shape it out of a single piece. I find doing equal parts of the toes and putting them one at a time works really well and makes the process a lot quicker. So I'm basically shaping the toes individually out with my fingers, and then I can start refining it a bit more once it's all put together, adding the toe beans, same deal, all the same pieces, and also the paw pad as well. All the same size for each 4 pieces. Once I'm happy with the way everything is looking, I can then bake that in the oven. So I usually takes about half an hour to bake, and then I let it to rest to cool down completely before doing anything. So once it's been baked, I can start painting up all the pieces that I'm going to be using. It's not very much painting for these ones. It's basically around the eyes, around the nose, the mouth, just the thinner parts of it. And then once I've added the faux fur anyway, I'm going to have to go over it again with the paint just to bring out that detailing a bit better. So I use water-based acrylic paint for this one. It's nothing special. It's called Chromacryl. I like the consistency of this paint, but you can get anything like Liquitex or Derivium Matisse. They work really well too, and definitely paints that I use. And then I can start attaching the armature pieces. So I'm using a 1/4 size ball and socket armature for this one, so it's the medium size. Basically map out with some reference images how big I want each piece to be, and then pop them together using a plier tool specific to this size. I've attached the armature to the clay pieces using some epoxy sculpt. And this is a really quick process to do. So I used to use wire a lot back in the day when I have to wait for things to dry, but by doing it this way with this ball and socket armature, it's really, really quick. I have some stock in my shop at creaturesinat.com, so I also do ready-made armatures too at this size. So check it out. If you have any questions, do let me know. And then I'm going to go in and add a little bit of colour on these paw pads. I don't need to be too careful where the paint goes, because again, I'm going to be covering it in faux fur anyway. And a lot of the colouring underneath around the bottom of the paw is black as well, so don't have to be too neat for this one. Once that's dry, I can start working on the body itself. So basically I create a muscle tone with some needle felting. So what I'm doing is wrapping some pipe cleaners around the armature, and this basically acts as like a catch for the polyfill to stick to, because the ball and socket armature is plastic and obviously very slippery. So I find adding some pipe cleaners around it makes the polyfill stick a bit better. And it doesn't affect the posability at all of the doll. So I'm just going to do an entire layer of the armature with the pipe cleaner, nothing too extravagant, just so it's lightly covered. And then I'm going to start needle felting it with some polyfill. So basically polyfill is like a cushion stuffing. I find it really works for needle felting bodies, and it's basically, like I said before, creating a muscle tone for the faux fur, and in this case to stick to. So yeah, I'm building the doll like you would a skeleton, muscle tone and then skin. I find it takes a long time. The process takes a bit longer than what I was doing before, but I find doing it this way, you get way more of a refined piece and a little bit more realistic. So it's definitely take the time to do it this way, and it just works out a little bit better. So after I have done the body with the needle felting and I'm happy with the way it looks, I don't have to be too careful with it, or I don't have to refine it a bit more, because I can go back and add more of that polyfill once I've sewn the torso piece up. So basically I start off by sewing the torso piece. This faux fur is really difficult to work with. It's really soft, and it's really hard to cut. So in terms of trimming this, it's a little bit difficult, but it's the same fabric that I used for the Black Panther, so I wanted to keep the same fabric for both of the dolls. But this one is obviously white, and I'm going to be airbrushing it at the end of the process. So I'm basically hand sewing everything together using a ladder stitch and a good quality thread. And then once I've sewn up this torso piece and I like the way it's looking, I'm going to add a little bit more polyfill to certain areas just to build it up a bit more. And then I can go ahead and add the neck, the legs, and the tail. Then I can go ahead and glue everything together. So I'm using a tacky fabric glue for this one, and usually leave it to dry overnight to make sure it's nice and adhered before I move on to any next steps. The next step is basically to add the faux fur to the head and the feet. For this faux fur, like I said, it is really difficult to work with, so normally I remove the backing off it, but this time I had to keep the backing on because one, it's really difficult to remove and creates a really uneven texture, so I don't want to do that. So I had to do a little bit of a different process and work with the backing, which doesn't turn out as smooth, but this one it turned out really smooth this time, so I took a little bit of time to make sure it's nice and blended. Then I started airbrushing the doll. Once I've had everything trimmed, I had to use a combination of scissors, and I usually use a pet groomer for trimming my faux fur, but it was really difficult to trim it. Let's just leave it that way. But we eventually got there. It's trimmed. It's looking really good. So I can start adding all the colours to the faux fur. So I'm using an eye water airbrush for my airbrushing, and just a really small compressor. It's not really big enough, but it works. So I'm just adding the first base layer, which is like a little bit of yellow. I wanted some areas to be a bit oranger, a little bit more yellow, a bit more white. So I'm just going in and doing a really rough layer of this yellow. Then I can go in and use a bit of orange, so it's like a rusty color for this one, and just going over and doing a really rough layer again, in some areas a bit darker, and some areas a bit lighter. Then I'm going to go in with some burnt umber, just in really sparingly, because I don't want this to look brown. I want it to look yellowy orange. So just really sparingly over the entire body, mostly around the legs and the back end, just a little bit of that raw umber. Then I can go in with the black and add all of the little rosettes. The middle of the rosettes, I'm going to add a little bit more orangey brown as well. So I ended up doing 2 layers of the black because I wasn't really happy the first time. It wasn't dark enough, so I went over it again and it turned out really well. So that is pretty much the entire process of making the Jaguar. It is available in my shop along with the Black Panther, so check it out, creaturesandart.com. Payment plans are welcome. I'm super flexible, so just shoot me a message and I can let you know how they work. You can also check me out on Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok. I do a lot of TikTok lives making these dolls, so check me out there if you want to see and have a chat. Anyway, thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe, all that stuff. It helps my channel grow. I'm trying to do a little bit more on my channel, so all that would help me a lot. Anyway, I will catch you in the next one. Bye!